read in books about your heart opening, and I don't mean just in a way of like feeling kindness or something like that, but what is the experience really of your heart truly opening?
Well, since the emotion that you feel is your indicator of your allowing or not allowing of your true connection, then we have to believe that what is really meant by that is just a full connection with who you really are. It's getting the resistance out of the way to allow the path to that enlightenment, alignment, connection.
And is it distinct? Do you know it when you arrive
Well, you know,
there?
it's an interesting thing because contrast, if you have not been allowing your heart to sing for a while, then it's not likely that you're going to do it all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. Because we talked recently, it's an analogy we've used from time to time, that if a train is going 100 miles an hour in this direction, it's not all of a sudden going to go 100 miles an hour in this direction. It's going to slow and then pick up momentum again. And the same is usually true of the thoughts that you have and the vibrational response, the emotional response to those vibrations. You usually don't just all of a sudden turn it around. It would certainly, a feeling of exhilaration would certainly be amplified if you could all of a sudden release resistance, and that really is what it will be when you experience what you call that death experience, where you reemerge into non-physical and in one fell swoop release all resistance and allow your vibration to raise. But while you are here in these physical bodies, it is a gradual thing. And so we think that what you're describing in that really intense knowing of it would not come from contrast, like when you're really, really hungry, it feels really good to eat. Mm-hmm. Not like that. But when you allow yourself to be reaching in the direction of what feels better, and then you allow more and more momentum to gather until that just becomes your habit of beingness. Because when you allow yourself to align with the whole of who you are, and you do it over a consistent period of time, what begins to happen, and this is really the sensation, or the reason for the sensation, or the point of the reason for the sensation. This is the where it's at moment when you raise your vibration deliberately or indeliberately, when your vibration rises and the vibration that's in the vortex moves into your grid, and that in that moment of realization, those are often those really high-flying good moments. And you can get on a path like that where you're so tuned in and you're so consistently feeling good that you're just on the brink of the grid filling in all the time with one thing after another. And that sort of momentum gives you that feeling, that strong feeling of elation. Mm-hmm. We think that might be what you're reaching for in that. Mm-hmm. When a lot of times people talk about forgiveness as being a good feeling moment. And we say what forgiveness is the releasing of the resistance, because you were holding yourself apart from who you really are by pushing against whatever it was. And when you cease to do that, and you open that valve between who you are and who you really are, mm-hmm. that sensation of energy flowing is really a delicious feeling. And in fact, that's why you came into this environment. It's one of the things that you're most looking forward to, is exploring contrast and knowing what you want and recognizing that you're not in alignment with it, and then deliberately doing something about coming into alignment with it so that the energy can begin moving and the manifestations can be happening. Mm-hmm. We think the perfect life experience is one where there's a little contrast and therefore a little definition and therefore a little recognition that you've expanded to something that you're not allowing, and then a little deliberate application of thinking thoughts, and then a deliberate acknowledgement that you're feeling better, and then a deliberate awareness, a conscious awareness of the grid filling in, and then a decided appreciation about where you now stand with your newly manifested experience, and a conscious patting yourself on the back as you recognize, I did that. I launched it, I wasn't lined up with it, then I got lined up with it, then it actualized, and then I recognized it, and now I've received the manifestation of it. And now, blessing of all blessings, I stand in a new place of even more potential for contrast, for even more deliberate detail in what I create.
And I have one other question. I do what some people refer to as automatic writing, or I'm tuning into either my higher self or others such as Abraham. Can I trust what I'm writing, or is it possible to be tuning into craziness? You know, I mean, with what I write.
Well, the most important thing about that is we don't push your pencil. That's your grid filling in with impulse. And so Esther remembers actually feeling energy in her arms. So it felt like her hands were being manipulated, but that was just the energy moving and all part of her translation process. Mm-hmm. So we just wanted to say that first, that unless you are tuned to a frequency, you're not getting the impulse to write. And the most important thing that we want to say to you, even more important than the answer that you want us to give you that we are going to give you, but this is even more important, is that the more you trust it, then the better your connection will be, because you can't receive and be in doubt at the same moment. Your doubt blocks the flow, you see. So if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would never doubt the connection. But we might ask the question, am I up to speed right now? Esther does that every single day, especially on a day when she's going to see you. She wants to make sure that she is in the most receptive of modes. And everyone around her does their best to make sure that there aren't things that she's going to stumble over that might make it more difficult for her to be in that place of alignment, you see. Because the place of alignment is of paramount importance when you are translating, you see. But don't hold yourself to some standard. Esther asked us hundreds, maybe thousands of times, especially in the beginning. She hasn't been asking the question in years. But she would ask frequently, Abraham, am I receiving you clearly? And our answer was always yes. Always yes, even though there were times when she was receiving us more clearly than others. When Esther is really tuned in, it just flows. You can feel it. You can see it. You know it. If Esther is in some sort of aggravated place, and she can still receive us, but it's a bumpier ride for her, you see. So don't doubt it. Trust it. And the more you do it, the more you will trust it. Now, you ask a question, are you receiving some sort of craziness? Well, when your intention is to tune in to that high frequency, that pure positive energy frequency, if you're not, you'll feel it. You see, it's not something that you ever want to force. And in some ways, have you been listening to us for a while? And so have you followed our conversation about deliberate creation and the art of allowing? And have you heard us talking and writing books about when you ask, it is given, and about the vortex? And now you hear us talking about the grid. Well, this conversation about the grid, we are really excited to introduce that into the conversation, because that grid, when you allow the grid to fill in, that's this conversation about allowing the impulse to write is exactly the same conversation that we want to have with all of you about allowing anything that you want. You don't want to fill your own grid in. And sometimes people get into an idea that they're wanting to receive from infinite intelligence, and they force it rather than allowing it, you see. And when you do that, you can feel a tension in that. When your intent is to allow it and nothing's flowing, well, it only means you haven't focused a question into being. It doesn't mean that you're unworthy and not receiving. And if something isn't flowing, it means one of two things. Either you haven't focused a question into being, or you're not up to speed with the answer that you are seeking, you see. So it's always the same process. Are you following that? If anything you want isn't coming, it's always for one of two reasons. Either you haven't focused it into being enough, or you're not in a state right now of allowing what you've focused into being. And this brings us to a place that we really want to be relative to this conversation of deliberate creation. Because we talk about the 3-step process. Contrast helps you to do step 1, which is ask. Source answers, which is step 2. The vortex and law of attraction, rounding up all those cooperative components. But your work really is step 3. You must be in a place where you are allowing what you've asked for. So everything is really about that, getting to that place where you are allowing. So then sometimes you're confused. Well, where do I stand in this deliberate creation? Should I be setting goals? Should I be scripting? Should I be visualizing? What am I supposed to do about my creation? And we so want you to understand that most of what is to be done about your creation, you've already done. Most of it you've already done because you sorted through the contrast and you launched those rockets of desires and source answered. So most of the doing that is to be done has already been done. So now your work is simpler than doing. It's more about allowing. But what do you do? What could you do? How can you allow? Abraham, you crazy ghost, how do I allow? How do I allow without doing? Isn't focusing doing? Well, it sort of kind of is, isn't it? So here's what we want you to hear. We've not been talking about this before, but it's right where we are in this leading edge conversation. So take it and play with it and enjoy it. When you deliberately think a thought with the intention of moving towards something you want, that's sort of determined, I'm thinking about this thought. Start again. Contrast caused you to put it in the vortex. It's done. Source already answered it, so it's done, 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 done. It's done, it's done, it's done, it's done. So the only question is, how are you going to get up to speed with what's done? Well, if talking about it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. If writing about it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. If imagining it and visualizing it makes you feel good, then that's getting you up to speed. So are you following us? That the majority of your work is simply for the reason of bringing yourself up to speed. Esther would say to Jerry all the time when they were driving, tell me a story. She just loved having him describe delicious things. Tell yourself stories. Tell yourself the way you want it to be. Envision it, yes, but speak about it right out loud. Talk about what you want. Isn't it nice? Don't I live in a wonderful environment? Isn't my world perfect? Aren't things always working out for me? Isn't it going to be fun when this fills in? Don't I love how the grid is filling in? In other words, use your words and use your focus, use your molding of the clay for the purpose of talking yourself into vibrational alignment with what you are wanting. The distinction, are you hearing the distinction that we're making here? Most people think that by setting the goal, that's when they're doing the work. You already set the goal when you sifted through the contrast and put it into the vortex. So the things that you might be doing now that fall into the category of focusing or visualizing or commenting or making lists of positive aspects or rampaging or focus wheeling, anything that you're doing by directing your mind toward the positive outcome that you want now, that's just you preparing your grid for the allowance of what's already in the vortex. Can you feel the distinction? So step 1, you've got step 1 and step 3. Step 1 is put it in the vortex. Step 3 is let it come out of the vortex into your reality. Step 1, step 3. Step 1, step 3. I want it, and these are the reasons why I want it. So any conversation that you have that makes you feel more enlivened about it. Haven't you ever found a really fun joke and you just want to tell it to everyone till you've looped around the second or third time and they say, enough already, I heard this from you. But don't you like to find things? Aren't there things in your life that you just keep wanting to talk about? Don't you want to just keep talking about the things that please you? Over and over and over and over and over and over again. The universe never tires. We will never say to you, we've heard it. We will never say to you, stop beating the drum of these pleasant things that you want to live. You will never hear that from us. We can't get enough of your positive reinforcement of what you're wanting.